More than any other video game company in the business, Nintendo's first-party franchises have remained some of the most beloved game series of all time. Nintendo's highly original and imaginative worlds have become staples of popular culture, and behind many of these franchises lies a deep, rich history of a company and developers who time and time again both pushed the envelope and innovated the industry. Mario, Nintendo's red-clad, mustachioed mascot, has featured in over 200 games, and is the best-selling video game franchise of all time. Pokémon out of the gate became a worldwide cultural phenomenon, and is second only to the Mario series in its successes. Even The Legend of Zelda, starring the iconic sword-wielding, tunic-wearing Link, has only seen its popularity grow throughout the years. But what about some of Nintendo's lesser franchises? Everyone knows Mario, Pikachu, and Link, but what about blasting your way through Corneria and Star Fox? What about leaving your foes in the dust as you put the pedal to the metal in F-Zero's Mute City? Or what about exploring the zany yet charming world of Eagle Land as you try to save the planet from an evil entity in Earthbound? Although many of these franchises, and others, have seen some past successes, they often dwell in the shadows of their sibling franchise's grandeur. However, perhaps no other franchise has spent more time, and indeed cultivated its very essence in the dark, cavernous underground of Nintendo's past, than Metroid. In this video, we will explore the deep origins of Nintendo's most overlooked franchise, from its inception to its journey into the present and future of gaming.
After the release of the Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo had a slew of successful titles that broke ground and broke sales records as well. Super Mario Bros. Laid the groundwork for modern platforming titles, featuring scrolling levels with tons of secrets to find. The Legend of Zelda redefined the adventure genre, combining puzzle solving, exploration, and action into one seamless experience. After the release of those two games, development began on another title, one that would combine the elements of both Mario and Zelda into yet another groundbreaking game that would influence countless titles down the road. Metroid was produced by Gunpei Yokoi and developed by Nintendo R&D 1. It began with the intent of creating a sci-fi action game with a darker theme than Nintendo's previous efforts. The game's title was a combination of Metro and Android. Designer Yoshio Sakamoto cited H.R. Giger's work on the film Alien as an inspiration for the game's look and feel. Partway through development, a staff member proposed making the main character female, and the rest of the team agreed. Thus, using Alien's protagonist Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, as inspiration, Samus Aran was born. Samus's design was done by Hiroji Kurotaki. She wears a power suit created by the alien race of bird people called the Chozo that enhances her abilities. One of these abilities is the Marumari, later renamed the Morph Ball, which allows Samus to roll into a ball to reach inaccessible areas. This idea was originally proposed to avoid animating the character crawling. Samus must infiltrate the Planet Zebes to destroy the titular Metroids, a biological weapon that is being used by the space pirates to attempt a takeover of the Galactic Space Federation. The planet's twisting, labyrinthian corridors had an almost biological feel to them, and Hirokazu Tanaka's soundtrack purposefully evokes an organic feel. Since her power suit is modular, Samus can find new weapons and suit modifications that enhance her abilities. This last feature of Samus' suit was a crucial part of Metroid. Up until its release, power-ups in platform games were normally single-use, limited-time resources. Metroid borrowed from Zelda's RPG mechanics and made power-ups permanent. Anything you picked up lasted until the end of the game, and some items were even required to progress. These included the Ice Beam, missile upgrades, and Varia Suit, which allowed Samus to traverse extreme temperatures. Another defining feature of Metroid was its backtracking. Late in development, with deadlines approaching fast, Sakamoto decided to use some clever coding and use existing assets to expand the game world, making it far larger than most console games at the time. To expand the game's length, he also forced players to backtrack through areas they had already visited once. To illustrate this, the very first obstacle in the game requires the player to run left instead of right, immediately subverting the player's expectations. This became a staple of the series, influencing many developers to take a more non-linear approach to game design. Due to its intense difficulty, lack of map, moody soundtrack, and alien environment, Metroid evoked feelings of isolation and desperation quite unlike anything before, somewhat akin to a horror game. The bosses of the game, Ridley, a reference to Weaver's character, and Kraid, both inhabited hideouts, intense gauntlets full of traps, enemies, and dangerous acid or lava. In order to save their progress, Japanese players used the Famicom Disk System's rewritable save feature. But when the game was released in 1987 as an NES cartridge, Nintendo introduced the first password system in a game, saving players' progress or unlocking secrets with infamous codes like Justin Bailey. At the end of the game, Samus escapes Zebes after defeating the leader of the pirates, the Mother Brain. After a self-destruct sequence has activated, the player is forced to backtrack through the caverns of Zebes as a countdown timer ticks away. This sequence became another staple of the series, recurring in many sequels thereafter. When Nintendo brought the series to the Game Boy, Samus gained more freedom of movement, a more detailed sprite, and several new weapons. The story picked up where the last game left off, with the Federation directing Samus this time to the planet SR388, the home of the Metroids. Their ability to suck the energy from any life form has led to them becoming the main predator on the planet, and Samus must exterminate all of the creatures one by one, including the Queen Metroid herself, in order to prevent anyone from using the Metroids as bioweapons again. In this game, Nintendo introduced new beams such as the Spazer, and series staples such as the Space Jump and Spring Ball. This game also introduced Samus's ship, which became an iconic staple of her character and the series. SR388 featured Chozo ruins to explore for the first time as well, with the original game featuring only statues of the ancient race, usually holding an important item for Samus to collect. As Samus descends deeper into the caverns and exterminates every last Metroid, including the end boss, the Queen Metroid, one hatchling is left alive. This tiny infant instantly imprints onto Samus as its mother, and Samus, in a rare bout of mercy, spares the infant. As the game concludes, the player is led back to the surface of the planet by the last Metroid, which eats away at previously impassable obstacles as the first calming, melodic tune of the game's entire soundtrack plays.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
These words are the first thing you hear when you start a new game in Super Metroid. Nintendo wanted to wait until the technology was there so that they could create a state-of-the-art action game, so the Super NES didn't get a Metroid game until early 1994. While development began 3 years earlier, Sakamoto described the first year of development as a learning period for the team, saying they had a strong desire to make something that people would compare to a movie. After familiarizing themselves with the Super NES hardware, Nintendo R&D 1 spent 2 years developing the game, creating a world so huge it had to be split into different areas and requiring a 24 megabit cartridge, making it the largest console game at the time. Because it was released so late in the life cycle of the system, however, it failed to make as much of a splash in Japan as its predecessors did, with consumer interest turning to the new Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation. In North America, Super Metroid fared better, backed by an aggressive marketing budget by Nintendo of America touting the power of the 24 megabit cartridge, as this was in the heat of the 90s console wars between the Super NES and Sega Genesis, and Nintendo needed a game to counter Sega's blast processing claims.
So what's blast processing do?
That's 24 megs worth of weapons, worlds, and weirdos old killer's up against. Nintendo's biggest game ever.
Many new features and refinements came to Super Metroid. Like most franchises that graduated to the Super NES, the graphics and sound received a notable boost in quality. Brinstar's arid, tropical landscape was tinted with the appropriate lush greens and rocky browns, while Norfair's red-hot lava now bubbled away and emitted heat waves, so you could almost feel the heat coming off of it. Bosses like Kraid and Ridley now towered above Samus, with Kraid in particular now taking up 2 screens. The soundtrack takes a more melodic approach than the first 2 games, this time composed by Kenji Yamamoto and Minako Hamano. But with the improved sound chip came haunting choral chants, jazzy bass lines, and triumphant horns, leading to a soundtrack that is now considered legendary. In terms of gameplay improvements, Nintendo added a much-needed map feature, introduced new items and weapons such as the grapple beam, power bomb, and x-ray visor, and fleshed out the story more, once again continuing right where the last game left off. After returning the infant Metroid to a Federation laboratory, Samus receives a distress signal, only to realize it is from the very space station she had just left. Upon arrival, the scientists have been murdered, and she finds the infant Metroid only to have it taken by none other than Ridley. Samus gives chase in her ship, and he leads her back to Planet Zebes, where a newly rebuilt space pirate base is once again in operation, and is set to work cloning the infant Metroid. Samus makes her way through familiar areas, Brinstar and Norfair, as well as new biomes such as the Surface Area Criteria or the watery Meridia, until she once again reaches Mother Brain's lair, Torion. Super Metroid's legacy is perhaps the greatest of the series, as it was quite a revolutionary game that started many trends we still see in games today. It, along with Castlevania Symphony of the Night, a few years later, cemented itself in the minds of gamers as a new genre unto itself, later coined as Metroidvanias. Although the first two games had multiple endings, Super Metroid was the first game to include sequence breaking, a method in which players could skip large parts of the game. This led to the birth of the speedrunning community, which is more vibrant today than it ever has been thanks to Twitch and YouTube. Many have called it among the greatest games of all time, and it is considered a crown jewel of the Super NES's stellar library.
Throughout the Nintendo 64 era, no new Metroid games were produced. Samus had an appearance in Super Smash Bros. In 1999, and a Game Boy Color port of Metroid 2 was planned, but never materialized. Nintendo supposedly approached developers about making a sequel to Super Metroid for the N64, but they were concerned they could not live up to the quality of the SNES game, while also successfully making the transition to 3D. Shigeru Miyamoto was later quoted as saying, "Even through the entire Nintendo 64 period, we were thinking of ways to produce a new Metroid title. We couldn't come up with any new concrete ideas or vehicle at the time. When I met the Retro team and saw the work they were doing, I thought that this was the kind of team that could work on a Metroid game." Retro Studios was formed in Austin, Texas in 1998 as a partnership between Nintendo and Jeff Spangenberg, who worked on titles such as Aero the Acrobat and Turok Dinosaur Hunter. The studio was formed with the intention of targeting an older demographic alongside the release of their new system, the GameCube. Work on concepts for the game that came to be known as Metroid Prime began in 1999. This was the first time that Nintendo's Japanese developers would coordinate development with a Western studio, relying heavily on email and sending producers to Texas to oversee creation of the game. Although fans reacted to the announcement of a first-person 3D Metroid game with initial skepticism, when the game released in the fall of 2002, it was met with immediate critical and commercial success. Many praised it for its graphics, atmosphere, and innovative gameplay that stayed true to the original games and emphasized exploration and world building. Kenji Yamamoto also crafted a fantastic electronic soundtrack that featured many new great compositions, as well as some updates of now classic tunes. Featuring the planet Tallon IV, Metroid Prime took place between the first two games chronologically. It followed Samus' continued pursuit of the space pirates, this time to stop them from bioengineering Metroids and other creatures into horrific monsters using a mutagen called Phazon. Samus explores the ruins, laboratories, mines, and caverns of Tallon IV, upgrading her arsenal and scanning objects and enemies with her visor to gain crucial information, or just to gain insight into the pirates' doings, or the long-departed Chozo's lore and teachings. Some criticized the game's movement, which had less freedom of control than other first-person shooters at the time, but Metroid Prime featured a Zelda-like targeting system to alleviate this, and was less combat-heavy than other first-person games as well. The developers were always careful to refer to it as an exploration game, rather than a shooter. At the same time that Metroid Prime was in development, the team at Nintendo R&D1 decided to make a new 2D Metroid game on the Game Boy Advance, Nintendo's new portable system. They briefly considered remaking or porting one of the first three games, but since it had been so long since a new Metroid, they vied to make a new title instead. Yoshio Sakamoto would write and direct the game, setting it canonically after the events of Super Metroid. Originally known as Metroid 4, it was released in 2002 as Metroid Fusion, the same month that Metroid Prime came out. Metroid Fusion added several new elements to Super Metroid's familiar structure, including grabbing and climbing ledges, animated cutscenes, and new beams and missiles. The story took Samus to a research station orbiting SR-388 that ends up infected by a mysterious parasitic virus, which inhabits the facility's research subjects as hosts and wreaks havoc on the station. She is given orders by her ship's AI, and moves from sector to sector, completing objectives. Each sector recreates a different alien environment, such as arid desert or deep sea reef. This was decidedly more linear than previous entries in the series, although it still provided plenty of secrets and shortcuts, and this format allowed for more cinematic storytelling in the form of monologues told by Samus, marking the first time her character was more deeply explored. The music was equally more dramatic, leaning into an even more orchestral sound than previous entries, and composed once again by Minako Hamano.
As successful as Metroid Prime was, selling millions of copies and later being dubbed one of the greatest 3D console games of all time, its sequels did not fare quite as well. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes was released 2 years later and continued the story, taking Samus to the planet Aether to battle the pirates again. This time they were joined by the Ing, an alien race born from a dimensional rift tearing the planet in two. Echoes experimented with gameplay features such as a light and dark world, consumable ammo, and competitive multiplayer. Unfortunately, Metroid Prime 2 sold less than the first game, owing largely to Nintendo failing to capture that mature player base they were hoping to cater to with the GameCube. That demographic had largely moved on to the PlayStation and Xbox systems at that time. The game sold barely over half of what the original Metroid Prime did, disappointing Nintendo. A second Metroid game was released for the Game Boy Advance in 2004. Originally considering a port of Super Metroid, Yoshi Sakamoto decided instead to completely remake the original NES game, in order to show people who had never played a Metroid game prior to Metroid Fusion the roots of the Metroid franchise. New cutscenes were added to complement the story, sporting more of a comic book style. The backgrounds in the game also employed the same thick lines and bright colors to make them stand out on the small screen, and the music was updated to match the later entries' more orchestral sound. A new segment was also added to the end of the game in which Samus loses her power suit, introducing players to the Zero Suit for the first time. A skin-tight blue outfit complemented by a ponytail and stun pistol. This incarnation of Samus would go on to become her own Super Smash Bros. Character with a completely unique moveset. Unfortunately, Zero Mission sold worse than Fusion, not even breaking 1 million copies. This may have been due to its late release on the Game Boy Advance's life cycle, and due to many reviews citing the game's relatively short length. Nintendo R&D 1 was later shut down during a restructure of Nintendo's development studios, and this would be the last traditional 2D Metroid game for many years to come. Metroid Prime 3 was developed for the Nintendo Wii, and added several gameplay enhancements, as well as truly impressive graphics for the time. Retro pushed the Wii hardware to its limits, featuring multiple planets that could be traversed via ship for the first time, and much larger areas to explore. The game also took full advantage of the Wii's motion sensor to simulate Samus Aran's arm cannon, grapple beam, and morph ball. Retro featured full voice acting in the game for the first time as well, and introduced a full cast of characters including Federation officers and fellow bounty hunters. Regardless of all of this, along with the huge success of the Wii, and Nintendo heavily pushing the game with their Month of Metroid promotion in August 2007, Metroid Prime 3, amazingly, barely outsold the second game, and still didn't come anywhere close to the nearly 3 million in sales that the original Metroid Prime managed. Nintendo would later release a slightly edited version of the third game alongside enhanced ports of the first two, in a special edition trilogy set. This was originally released in limited quantities as a steelbook, which sent the resale value soaring, until Nintendo digitally released it on the Wii U eShop years later.
After Metroid Prime 3, Retro took a break from this series to develop a new Donkey Kong Country game instead. During this time, series veteran Yoshio Sakamoto returned to the series, partnering with Koei Tecmo Studio and Team Ninja to develop yet another 3D Metroid game for the Wii, known as Metroid Other M. Taking place after Super Metroid and largely going back to the series' 2D roots, it was a very different beast from Metroid Prime. Changes included numerous gameplay perspective shifts, at times baffling puzzles, and the developer's frustrating choice to support only one control scheme, the Wii Remote turned on its side. For these reasons, Other M proved to be a divisive game, receiving largely negative to mixed reviews. Some derided the game's focus on story, as it relied on numerous lengthy cutscenes. Some also disliked the way the story fleshed out Samus's character, as her normally stoic, heroic demeanor was, some would say, undercut by the game's portrayal of her. This is particularly evident when she knowingly puts herself in danger simply because a senior officer orders her to, or when she succumbs to a panic attack due to post-traumatic stress disorder upon encountering Ridley again, despite having fought him numerous times before.
Ridley?
Many fans and critics reacted negatively with this portrayal of her, saying it was at odds with the original role of Samus as someone who, at the time of her inception, broke the mold of what a video game hero could be and provided a strong female role model in a medium where they were sorely lacking. After its release in 2010, Other M went on to sell poorly as well, selling even less than Metroid Prime 3 did. The Metroid Prime series had 3 spin-off games on portable systems as well. Metroid Prime Pinball for the DS in 2005 was a surprisingly faithful retelling of the first Prime game. It took advantage of the system's optional Rumble Pack, and Tallon IV was represented by pinball tables navigated as a morph ball. Metroid Prime Hunters, also for the DS, came out the next year, and was a more traditional first-person Prime game that took place between the first 2 titles. It was one of the first DS games to feature online multiplayer, introducing several new bounty hunters to play as. Finally, Metroid Prime Federation Force for the 3DS was an online co-op game released in 2016, in which players assumed the roles of Federation Marines rather than Samus herself, much to the chagrin of longtime fans eager for a new mainline Metroid title. Federation Force did not sell well. No original Metroid game was developed for the Wii U, as Retro Studios went ahead with a sequel to their successful reboot of Donkey Kong Country instead. Samus and her gunship did feature in a minigame for the launch title Nintendo Land called Metroid Blast. Based on a tech demo from E3 2011 called Battle Me, players controlled Miis wearing power suits using the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, or controlled Samus' ship itself using the motion controls on the Wii U gamepad. Featuring co-op and competitive modes for up to 5 players and lots of enemies, locations, and orchestrated music from the Metroid series, it was unfortunately still the closest thing we've gotten to an HD Metroid game.
Fans' long-awaited desires for a traditional-style Metroid would finally be answered in 2017 with the release of Metroid: Samus Returns. This would be the first time Nintendo released a new, traditional 2D Metroid in 13 years. It was a retelling of Metroid 2, Return of Samus, only with a redesigned world, new 3D graphics, and several new weapons and abilities inspired by sequels like Super Metroid and Metroid Prime. The game was developed by Spanish studio Mercury Steam, who previously developed titles in Konami's Castlevania series for the 3DS. Samus Returns proved to be a hit, pleasing longtime fans with a return to form for the series, and serving as one of the swan song titles for the 3DS before the release of the Nintendo Switch. Also in 2017, Nintendo revealed a brief announcement of the long-awaited Metroid Prime 4 for the Nintendo Switch, showing only the new logo for the title. Unlike the previous entries in the series, it was announced that Metroid Prime 4 would not be developed by Retro Studios. Later on it was rumored and then confirmed that Bandai Namco would develop the game. However, in an update video posted in early 2019, Nintendo's Shinya Takahashi confirmed that development of Metroid Prime 4 was not meeting Nintendo's quality standards, and that development of the game would essentially need to be restarted from the beginning. It was also confirmed that Retro Studios would be back on board to develop the title, and since then no further updates have been announced. In tandem with Metroid Prime 4, it has been heavily rumored by various media outlets that a port of the Metroid Prime trilogy will be coming to the Nintendo Switch in the form of an HD remaster. While this has yet to be officially confirmed, it's certainly a possibility, and fans eager to play some Metroid Prime on their Nintendo Switch should keep their eyes peeled for a potential forthcoming announcement. In early 2018, it was officially revealed that the latest title in the Super Smash Bros. Series was in development, dubbed Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. As with most other games in the series, heavy speculation and rumors started circulating about what new characters would make the cut, one of which being longtime fan request Ridley. While Ridley had made appearances in the series in the past as a boss and stage hazard, fans' desires to see the character brought to the forefront only increased with each subsequent entry. Finally, as part of Nintendo's 2018 E3 Direct presentation, Ridley was officially revealed as the first new playable fighter for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. A few months later, at an August Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Focus Direct, Dark Samus was also revealed to be playable as an Echo Fighter of Samus, doubling the amount of Metroid representation in Super Smash Bros.
The Metroid series has sustained a quality that easily stacks up to any of Nintendo's more well-known franchises, and a legacy that has resonated through the industry for decades. Even considering a few missteps in later years, Metroid games have become the gold standard in quality and attention to detail for the genre they created, and have been tremendously influential and innovative throughout the series' now over 30-year history. Although often overshadowed by its older siblings Mario and Zelda, and later by the global hit that was Pokémon, Metroid has, and shall always be, an important part of Nintendo's rich history. When it comes to Samus Aran's future expeditions, the possibilities are boundless, and there's no doubt that the series will continue to have a life far into the future. Until then, see you next mission.
I want to thank everyone for watching this video. I also want to give a very special thanks to James for his heavy contributions to this video, including writing most of the script and his voiceover work. Please be sure to check out his channel, Bacon Mob, which will be linked in the description below, and subscribe to him. Seriously, he's got some awesome content, guys. I have many other videos like this planned, including a history of Enix titles for the Super NES, and other brief history videos of other franchises, gaming companies, and more. I have a ton of content on my channel, so I hope you'll check out some of my other stuff, such as my playthroughs of a couple different Metroid games, plus my top 20 Super NES games of all time and my brief history of Rare videos. I also hope that if you enjoyed this video, you'll give me a like and consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this in the future. Thank you guys, again, as always, so much for the support and love that you guys give me. It really does mean so much to me, and it's what drives me to keep doing projects and other videos like this. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys. Love you guys. See you next time. Peace.